Thank you guys for joining us for office hours today. This is where we handle all of the questions that come to us over the week. Also a great chance for us to ramble and enjoy. So if you want, we've got a couple of different things going. We've got Instagram, we've got Facebook and Zoom. So just trying to handle any questions. If you have any questions live for us, just post it in the chat there and we'll get to it. I think a couple of things we've got coming up. March 7th is a Tackling the Hills clinic right here. Oh, sorry.
Create Your Own Training Plan is on March 7th.
That's the first one.
That's going to be led by Andrew. However, myself and a couple of our other coaches will be showing up too to help everyone else out with creating their own training plans for the upcoming season. This is going to go into the science. What we do as coaches to make sure that you're staying healthy, so that if you either are looking to create your own or wondering why your coach is doing what they're doing, you can come. It'll be free. And then March 21st, we're going to have a Tackling the Hills clinic. That's where I'm going to work with you guys on creating a good, efficient form and running up hills, how to use heart rate training to be the strongest, and then also just working on some drills and skills so you get the strength building. And then we're also going to have a group run on March 8th to celebrate daylight savings and having some evening sun. And that will be at 6:30 p.m. at Cannonball Brewery. You should show up and run with me.
Yeah, you should.
Because otherwise I run by myself and it's sad.
Yeah, no one likes that. I'll hopefully be back. I'm coming back from an ankle injury, which is a huge bummer. But I think injury is a great thing to, if there's a time to have one, it's now. Unless I was training for Boston, then I'd be a little upset. But a couple of things we're going to talk about today. Talk a little bit about workouts and kind of what do we do if we got to break those up into two things. Is that the right thing to do? What's the preferred thing in terms of how does the coach look at it? I want to talk a little bit about the exciting thing coming up this weekend, the Olympic trials. We've also got Boston Marathon not too far away from us. And then I think a great thing right now, especially with coronavirus, is talking about how can we travel for a big event, a big race, and stay healthy while traveling. And anything else that comes up in the chat here, we'll answer and fire away with. So if you've got any questions or any thoughts about things to share, feel free to write those in the comments. We'll be looking for you. Thanks, Michael, for joining in the Instagram world of things.
Hey, Michael.
Very cool. You want to talk about how we kind of handle and manage, if you got to break up your workout or things like that? Is that the preferred way to do things? What's ideal?
So the question came regarding a Friday workout where this particular athlete is also a coach for her where she teaches. And so it was hard for her to get a whole workout in the morning and then also after practice in the evening. So she was wondering if it's best to break it up. This is kind of where we kind of need to look at what your workout for the day is and what your tomorrow will look like, as well as when you usually run. If you are always a morning runner and you're planning on getting your long run in the next day, or you have a hard workout the next morning, I don't think it's going to be beneficial to do that break up that easy run. Maybe it calls for 6 miles, doing 3 and 3 or 2 and 4. Just isn't really we're just going to more fatigue the body than we are going to actually serve it.
You'll only be partially recovered.
Yeah. So I'd say get in what you can at your usual time of running, and just avoid that extra stress of staying up a little bit later, prolonging dinner when you're already going to be putting in a hard effort the next day.
Right.
If it's something like a hard workout, it's going to be best to try and put it all together same. So maybe look if you can rearrange days.
Yeah, right. That may be that you have to move your day around, because when we're looking at it, it's kind of that main set. And what we call the main set is anything between the warm up and the cool down. That's we really want that to be kind of a continuous thing. We don't want to do 3 intervals in the morning and then 3 intervals at night. And kind of the big theme across this, and anytime we really don't want to break things up until we get to the point of maybe talking about a long run like we did last week, where breaking up a long run can be a strategy. It can be a way of getting more stimulus and actually trying to be partially recovered, and that you're working through some of the fatigue there. Like for an ultra runner, back-to-back long run days, we know we're going into those things not recovered, but we don't want that for our workouts, because we're trying to do something very specific physiologically. When we're going out, you wouldn't go and do 6 of your 400s and then have to re-warm up, do another 6 400s, and then cool back down. it's almost making more work for yourself to try and break up the series of the workout into two separate things. If anything, what I'd say is that if it's an hour-long workout that's planned, and then we move into you've only got 45 minutes, I would say if you're going to do anything, cut the cool down and make it a priority to stretch or do something, go for a walk that evening, and that's probably better to make up. I don't like to say that word, to make up mileage and things like that, but I'd much rather see athletes do a proper warm up and get the main set in, and then cut off something on the back half. Or even if you can't get all the reps in, that's part of it. But you don't want to cheat your warm up at any point, because that's really your only chance to kind of check in and see what's happening there in terms of your body's point to check in. So make sure you're doing easy, nice easy warm up. One of the things I've seen with a lot of athletes lately, and kind of one of the struggles. Hi, Miss Lucy. Is I've seen a lot of athletes that they'll go into their warm-up, they'll do their main set, and then the cool down, their heart rate is just as high as their main set. And it's like, you really got to bring that down. You actually want to cool down and actually run slow. I think we start to look at the watch and we start to say, yeah, I can hold this. I feel okay. And it's kind of one of those like little lies we tell ourselves, like, I feel okay. This is recovery. When really your heart rate's still pretty darn high. And
that's where time management comes in extremely useful. If you're running late to work and so you're hauling through your cool down, you're not really serving your body. So I know it's hard because I'm the kind of person who's always running late. So I've been there, but be sure that you're giving yourself enough time to work out and you're finding the right time of the day to get in those workouts.
Absolutely. I think that it can definitely be kind of hard because you want to try and get as many of those miles in. And it's one of those, like, I got my 9 miles in, but was it 9 quality miles, or was it really like 7 quality miles with 2 that were kind of garbage? And did those really serve you? Were they good for you? So anyways, I think that when it comes to workouts, it's best to kind of get what you can in for the main set. When it comes to long runs, it can be a strategy, but ideally you're getting your workout in is all one thing.
An easy aerobic run's just it's a few miles short. It's a few miles short.
Yeah. It's gotta, it's supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. Well,
another question that came up this week that I think is worth addressing is when to reset your zones.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that's something we're asked frequently.
It's that time of year too.
Yeah. So you had a good answer for that on the Facebook survey.
Yeah. I usually look to, especially with an athlete that's coming from, maybe they've just done some general running and general training, to moving into more specific training. Like maybe they're following a plan with a coach now. It's like, okay, how often should I reset my zones? How do I know when to reset my zones? The way I look at it is you can pretty much test your zones every 6 to 8 weeks and kind of see if the training that you've done has produced a result. And that's going to give you a good insight about, again, just that. Where is my training put me? But also, is that last set of results still correct? And sometimes it's a bummer to say, oh, I didn't improve my threshold. I maintained it. And sometimes that's where you need to be this time of year, is that it's better to see that you've maintained something, even if you haven't, made progress. And I think progress is not one of those linear things. You can be at that same threshold for months and months and months, but the progress you've made is in your ability to run longer or your ability, you may be working on some other things. So it's not just if I don't improve my VO2 max or my threshold or my normalized power, it's not just a static thing. In terms of how do you know? If your workouts are feeling really easy, right? If you're doing 800s and you're constantly seeing that you're able to push them below what you've been seeing before, those are the signs that normally, hey, I've made some improvement. I should probably update those things, because the way that we've structured, especially our curated program, is the workouts that we've designed, we use the workout builder so that when your workouts, when your threshold changes, your workouts get harder. So really it's about making sure that you kind of keep up with that, because if you don't, then you're going to do workouts that aren't challenging anymore. No one wants that. You want to kind of be pushing just a little bit.
And of course, this is for workouts and not for your easy runs. So if your easy runs are feeling easy, don't worry about it. I think that's what I hear most is people are like, well, that's feeling too easy. It's like, good.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. I would say kind of the same. I always look at 7 weeks, but I don't think it's something we should rush in the process.
Yeah.
If you're getting faster, you're getting faster, and it'll keep building. So just be patient with yourself.
I think one of the things that I've learned kind of in this arc of things is I'm working through an injury right now. I've got a bone bleed in my ankle. It's not a stress fracture. It's not fully like a stress reaction. It's somewhere in the middle because I got an extra bone in my foot. And so I spent a lot more time on the bike, and it's kind of jogging back my memory to when I was a triathlete. And I actually didn't have a power meter. I trained my entire Ironman training season, almost a year and a half of getting ready for that race on an just fluid trainer. And I would just go roughly based on the speed. But I mean, if my tire pressure was different, all those other things. And now I have power. And so I started off, and when I found that I was first having pain, I went and did a 20-minute test, then a regular FTP test to figure out what are my zones so I could actually do some workouts. And Katie, my wife was kind of saying like, you should do another test. I'm like, I don't know if I should do another test. They're hard. 20 minutes is a really hard test. And then I did the ramp test. And this is just where you start at 100 watts, you add 20 watts every minute. And at some point it does get really, really hard. And I improved by 9 watts, which I thought was fairly reasonable considering I'm pretty untrained in that area. But that was only after about 3 weeks. I think more than anything, I've probably just figured out what I can actually do on the bike. I'm kind of curious to see that once I get on the other side of this injury. I'm kind of doing another personal test on myself to see if I can improve that. But I'd love to hear from anybody. And I see Dave is with us on Instagram. Maybe Dave has some thoughts on how much he loves the ramp test versus a 20-minute test. We'll see if he has anything to share there. But it's kind of an interesting way to look at, does a ramp test versus how long can you hold a traditional threshold test? What's the better, I guess, test for figuring that out and working with athletes? I personally, when I'm doing a fitness test, I like to do somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 to 28 minutes. 20 minutes versus like a distance. I want to see that they can hold that for 20 minutes. If I'm working with an athlete that's a beginner and brand new, I'm going to give more towards that 20-minute side. If I've got an athlete that's maybe sub 3 hours, things like that, I'm going to move towards 24 to 28 minutes because I want to see that not just can they hold a certain pace, but how well do they pace themselves? What is that heart rate? Are we seeing that there's a trend upwards? What's their decoupling? The decoupling for me is a big metric that I like to use because it's an efficiency metric. You might be able to run fast, but if it's really inefficient, it's not your best. There's clearly more there if you're doing it pretty inefficiently.
For newer runners or people who are working on pushing themselves more, I always look to see if they're not pushing themselves during that fit test or that threshold test. If they're just kind of like heart rate staying low, they're very controlled, maybe a little bit too controlled.
Right.
Talking about that confidence of like, okay, where is your speed? And that's largely for people who are, again, newer to racing or newer to stepping up in competitiveness.
I think one of the things everybody should do at least once is completely blow up in a fitness test. Like absolutely blow up. And I say that not because I want people to feel pain. I guess actually it is a little bit that I want them to feel pain. I want them to feel like what it feels like to go to 100% too early, or to not quite judge that right, but know that if you failed and you went too far too early, at least we now know what that feels like, where that edge is, and have an understanding of 10 out of 10. Because if you don't do that, and if you don't push to that limit, you won't have anything to say, I need to stay underneath that line. You'll always kind of feel like you're not quite bumping up against it. And that's where, like, even doing something with an athlete, like most people can run a mile, but can you run a mile all out? And like using that as a way of, just getting them more comfortable with that discomfort of running really hard, and saying, okay, as long as it doesn't feel like that at any point in your fit test, you've got a good relative understanding of where you should be. So I think blowing up is a good thing. I think it can hurt people's confidence in a race, but that's why we try not to do it in a race.
Mm-hmm.
If we have good zones and we know what we're set with, we should never have to blow up unless we make some mistakes. But that's the learning process of training, right? Cool.
So before we move on to the next topics, does anyone out there have any questions for us? Feel free to type them in.
Yeah. Don't make us feel lonely. I got 3 eyes over here. One person, maybe Dave is still watching, just, out there. I know you guys are out there. Questions, thoughts, comments, feedback, banter, all that's good stuff. Jokes. Let's talk about the trials.
Yeah.
Who you got?
Men or women?
Ooh, I'm gonna. I'll say mine. Then you say yours.
Okay. I'll have to think of who I put.
You got to think of who you put.
I have to think of who I put. It's okay. So we're doing a contest.
Yeah.
I think I put the last date as last night, but it's actually I'm moving it. Tomorrow morning before the trial start is the last day to enter. So I actually have everyone's answers.
Yeah,
I won't share them.
It's in our internal group. So if you guys are not in our group on Facebook, feel free to come over. It's our Lifelong Endurance Athletes and Coaches group. You don't have to be an athlete with us. You don't have to be a coach with us if you want to come in and be a part of the conversation. It's kind of one of those things. If you're going to join a group, be active, be a part, offer some insights and some thoughts.
It's a great community.
Yeah, I love it.
I love watching people interact and
watch them learn
when they share their results, which is, I wish we'd saw more of because you're all amazing. But everyone's so supportive and lovely, and it's just like the athletic community anyway.
Yeah.
It's just a great community to be a part
We're
of.
all over the place, I think, because it's nice to see we've got some big representation in Texas, but we've got representation all over the world, and it's great to see all the questions and things that come in. Make it really nice and dynamic.
Okay.
Cool. I know who I've got. I'll admit that for the men's side, I can see Galen pulling it out, but also could see Jared Ward up there. So I think I had Galen, Ward, and Career as my top 3. My guess is, if it's a good day, kind of seeing that the hills are going to make this about a minute and a half slower, I could see it being a 2:07 kind of day. But I could also see that moving towards, something as high as 2:11. Depending on how that race plays out, I would still love to see Jim Walmsley go out front and just go for a tear.
Idealistically, I put him as my 5, my 5th guy. As an ultra runner, I just felt I had to.
Have to.
I did mine very idealistically. I'm not going for the win. I'm going for, putting out into the universe what I hope to come into fruition.
Let's hear it.
So I have Leonard as my number 1. I have Jared Ward as my number 2. Scott as my number 3. Mock as my number 4. And then Walmsley. I'm thinking it's going to be a race where people are going to run conservatively. So I put 2:11 as my predicted time. It's not going to be hot, but it's going to be hilly.
Yep.
And I think hopefully people are going to be smart and hold back. And then it's going to be a sprint at the finish.
I think all the excitement's going to happen after the 30K mark.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody will know by then if there's some attrition due to the hills. But I think you're right. I think, it's supposed to only be a high of 50 degrees. Which is awesome marathon weather. It's like right in that ideal mark. So it's got the potential that if it was a flat course, it could be super fast, but it's hilly. It's not crazy hilly, but I think it actually benefits.
And the hills are at the end.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think it benefits actually those runners that are
Walmsley.
Strength.
Yeah.
Right. It actually does benefit a guy like Walmsley, and I could see that being an upset. So, I went with, the known factors, the known guys out there for me. But when it comes to an upset, Walmsley could totally go out there and upset it because at the end of the day, he doesn't have anything to lose. He's already like the king of ultras.
Yeah.
Right. In the last decade, it's hard to see anybody that's been able to surpass what he's done. And, he could still go run this marathon, recover and play enough time and have a great summer of ultra running. Whereas most guys after this, it's like, okay, I got to pull back and get ready for the Olympics. And that's their next big thing. So it's interesting to see how this plays out. My women's picks, I'll have to go back and look. I think I know I had Sarah Hall in there.
I can pull up for you.
Oh yeah, pull me up. I think I had Sarah Hall. I wanted to change. I want to put Molly Huddle in there. The more I thought about it, she does have a lot of great background. She's just raced a lot. So I think she might have a little bit more of that willingness to sit back and push. Unfortunately, I don't see Desi in there.
I, again, idealistically put her in there. I don't know if it's going to happen for her.
Couldn't forget Jordan.
Yeah, she was my number one.
Mine too.
I think she wants it. She's been wanting it for a while and holding back on races because
that hamstring
but so
injury.
is Rob. So
yeah, but is that hamstring injury? I mean, that's the thing, right? Both Gaelan and Jordan, they've had a huge change in their coaching in the last year, which is pretty important. So, yeah, Brian, it is televised. It's going to be on NBC Sports. It's actually going to be regularly televised. You don't have to have NBC Sports Gold or the Olympic channel. So it's actually going to be televised live. Even if you're not a runner, it's worth watching because it's not going to be like watching the New York City Marathon where it's just blah, 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 blah. There's actually some really cool stories this year as far as like who's come, really close, who's come the farthest. But also there's so many opportunities to see things change up in terms of, who could really be up front there. I don't think there's nothing set in stone here. I had Jordan, Sarah Hall, and then Emma Bates.
I had Emma too.
Yeah, I think Emma Bates could come out of nowhere. My fourth there would be having someone along the lines of Molly Huddle, and then I put all the way in fifth would be Des. My guess is that Des is going to be in that front pack through 30K. She may try to make a push and see what's in her body, what's in her legs. Again, she's made another coaching change from the Hanson's group. So a lot of this has kind of moved around quite a bit. I think, I think a lot of people are looking at Des and saying, hey, was Boston 2018 a fluke or is that a reality?
Right. And I mean, of course, when we think back to the Boston 2018, we thought things were different. We had Sarah Sellers, was that comeback, and she hasn't done much since.
Right.
So it's hard because if it's a tough day, there's some tough runners, but
doesn't look like it's gonna be a tough day.
It's not gonna be a tough day.
Looks like it's gonna be a beautiful day with perfect weather, and it's gonna come out to who's got the best strategy. I think this is a very strategic race, and it's not gonna favor the usual light and fast athletes on a purely flat course. You're gonna have to be strong, which could benefit Des. She's a strong athlete, so it could come out to. We watched the last trials. The last 3K there was pretty gnarly. So, yeah, Brian, sorry. If you want to shoot some questions over, either shoot them in the chat here on Lifelong Endurance or hop on over. We sent a Zoom link into the athletes and coaches page. You can hop on there and ask questions live with us if you'd like.
And then you had your time as a 225 for the women.
Yeah.
I had 226. Again, I think it's going to be a conservative race.
For sure.
And that's typically how the trials go. Those who are leading in the first few are those who are very excited and maybe don't have all the marathon experience.
Right.
And this is their time to shine.
I think we see that a lot. Those early races, we'll see some people up front and you're like, okay, are you going to be a player and a contender? Or are you just trying to get a little time on TV?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if this is your big event for the year, why not just be that rapid and mess with everyone's heads? Yeah.
I mean, the world's watching.
Yeah. I think we also should give a quick shout out to our coach, Nicole Camp, who is going to be racing, and then our youth assistant coach,
Miss Ashley.
Yeah, I was trying to think of her last name.
Yeah.
And so look for them. They're both awesome. And
this will be Nicole's
third
time at the Olympic trials, which is pretty darn cool to see her show up for her third Olympic trials. So Nicole, good luck out there. Ashley, if you guys haven't had a chance, hop over to Ashley's page. Her coach, David Roach, wrote a really awesome article that kind of looks through a really cool lens. Interesting story there for those that don't know. Ashley and Jordan Hasay actually raced each other not once but twice in a head-to-head Foot Locker battle back in high school. So these guys have been racing since high school, and so it's kind of cool to see them come back. Jordan, of course, has stayed mostly on the track and on the roads and went to NOP. Ashley went to Duke and then kind of moved her way into the trail world. Ashley's now a professional athlete with Hoka. So it's been really cool to watch her make multiple Team USAs and really represent the country off-road. So it's kind of cool to see an off-road athlete actually making the trials as well.
For
So,
sure.
yeah, it was really cool. It was actually, Ashley used to be my training partner. And the year that I ran CIM, my PR year, I ran 2:39. She ran 2:41 that year. We actually ran through the half marathon mark together. So it was really cool to be able to kind of have that connection with another athlete, and now watch her going on to the trials is really, really cool. So excited with that. If anybody's got any other questions and things, throw those into the chat. We are watching. We see you guys on Instagram. Looks like we've got only one other person. I'll shoot a couple hey waves over there to Mr. Dave and SACU 300. So thank you guys for joining. Appreciate you guys coming out. Don't be afraid to ask those questions.
We have anyone on the Zooms?
Let's see if anybody's hopped over to the Zoom.
We have a lot of things happening over here.
Nope. Actually, we don't have as much happening as we thought.
I mean, we have a lot of screens.
A lot of screens going
on.
Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about staying healthy while traveling. I think this time of year is one of the harder times to stay healthy, to not get sick. And I think when we talk about endurance, hey, Miss Leslie, when we're traveling for races, especially after we've come off of a really hard training cycle, we've got a suppressed immune system. What do we do? What are your tips?
Well, one of the times athletes are most at risk of getting sick, unfortunately, is when they start their taper. Mm-hmm. So if you're starting to kind of get that itchy throat, kind of that tired feeling, hydrate. I always push the tea, even if it's a placebo, just getting something that's kind of soothing your throat, a different way to trick yourself into getting more liquids. Really keeping up with like the vitamin A, vitamin C, so sweet potatoes, carrots, lots of fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. Gotta eat the rainbow, man.
Yeah. And then if you're not feeling up for a run, still getting out for a walk to kind of keep your body moving. Avoiding children. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, don't avoid if you have children.
Avoid them. Lock them in a different room.
Yeah. No, kidding. But kids do carry more germs. And I think it's definitely one of those situations where you want to not touch your face a whole lot. I think one of the big things is doorknobs. When you're getting on a plane, you're in that crowded area, there's all those stainless steel surfaces that like you're touching the rail, you're getting into the train. Like I'm thinking about DIA. You just have to touch stuff when you're in that airport. Like there's no way of getting around. Like the thing that grosses me out the most is when I go to DIA and I gotta go and I gotta switch concourses, and you gotta grab the stainless steel rail in the tram, and I'm just like, like all I want to do is like go wash my hands right now. And so like carry one of those little baby like Purell things, or just wash your hands a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of actually using Purell a whole lot, because there are such things as good bacteria, mm-hmm. and you want some of that. And when you use Purell and things like that, it just kills all of the things, and it can actually make you more susceptible to little small stuff that wouldn't have normally taken you down can take you down. So wash your hands regularly. Try not to touch your face. The fluids a lot. I also just keep my calories up and taper more. And I try not to ever get to the point where I'm extending myself. I'm like, oh God, I haven't eaten in like 4 or 5 hours. Mm-hmm. Like keep some snacks handy, and just try to kind of keep your energy level up. Because when our energy level comes down, it's just really hard to get back going mm-hmm. again.
Make sure you're sleeping well. Yeah. I think that's the other thing that kills our immune system.
You got to be good at napping. Like I am. I love naps. I think naps are one of the best things we can do.
Or get to bed early.
Yeah.
Like make sure that you're in bed at a certain time, giving yourself that 8 hours, as close to 8 hours as you can.
Absolutely.
In general, for traveling, what tips do you have for if someone's traveling for a race? So I feel like this is a big one where I've seen lots of mistakes happen.
Well, the big mistake is if you're going to have a carry-on, your race kit absolutely has to go in your carry-on. Mm-hmm. If you've got race flats, race shoes, your singlet and shorts, and then your nutrition. Mm-hmm. Like I'll even, to the point when I say nutrition, I will pack like my oatmeal or my bagel and all that into my bag in like a big gallon size Ziploc bag. So when I go through security, I can just put that in there and I don't have to go through the pain in the butt of having them pull it out and go through my food and touch it. That's gross. I don't want that. Stop. Like I will put all of that in there so that I know that if nothing else shows up, I can at least guarantee, like, I'll wear the same clothes for 3 days if I have to, but I don't want to have to race without my shoes. You know, I don't want to have to go to the expo and buy all new stuff. You know what I mean? That's never fun. It breaks all the rules of, you know, when you're going to race a marathon, don't run in new shoes, don't run in that stuff. So for me, that's kind of number one. I also think that making sure that the day before the race, go to the expo first thing in the morning. Just get it over and done with, and don't plan to go do like a 5-mile walking tour of wherever you are. Just chill out. Like, if you're going to go and you're going to experience a city for the first time, like, either plan time before the race long enough that you can get there, you can run and relax, or spend time there after, and kind of use that time afterwards to kind of, you know what, I'm going to walk around after my race. It's probably a good recovery versus trying to get there for a Saturday race on Friday. And then, you know, you're going to get there in the morning and you're going to walk the whole day. And then you're spending time on your feet that you don't need to be spending. It's just not useful. So those are my tips. You know, stay off your feet the day before, eat well, pack your stuff in your carry-on.
And I'd say really just plan ahead on the transportation. Make sure you're flying in at a reasonable time. As somebody who's done the overnight flight before race, not the smartest, but
it hurts.
Yeah, it's cheap.
It is cheap.
Yeah, but try and make sure you're getting sleep. Make sure you understand like the public transportation of the area. I mean, you don't have to take an Uber. I think most big cities have amazing transportation, but try and plan ahead. Get the Google Maps so you're not getting stressed out going to the expo or getting to the race. Or if say your phone dies in New York, you know how to get back to where you're staying. Not that happened to me also.
Oh God, the calamity of errors. I actually like to carry my phone now with me, and then just like I will take and I'll put in my case my credit card. So no matter what, like, I look at this, what's my worst case scenario? I have to like go to a 7-Eleven and buy one of those pill chargers and a cable. At least I have my credit card, because it's like, it's great if you can use Apple Pay and your phone's working and it's alive and on, but what if it's not? Like, you got to at least have some backup, or throw some cash in there or whatever. Or just be able to have a credit card so you can buy coffee if the train system's down. Right? It's overloaded or whatever it is. I've had to walk numerous blocks, like freezing cold after a race, to get to an Uber. And it's no fun. And I was really happy my phone worked. It sucks when it doesn't.
Other things I would say is, if you're staying in a new city or you're traveling or you're staying in a hotel, making sure you have a good plan for food. Again, I don't think you need to spend a lot of money and go out to eat, but I know like certain sandwiches are always going to work well for me before a race. I try and stay in hostels over hotels so I can cook. Again, it's cheap. If you want to know the way to travel for a race cheaply, I'm your girl.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. So let's talk a little bit about like, how do we know what works for us? And I think that's when we're doing training runs and we're actually looking at, you know, your nutrition for a long run, even that preparation beforehand. You know, for me, I know that there's about 7 different things that I can eat before a long run, before a race, wherever I am. I've raced all across the world. Like, I've literally done races on like cheese, tomatoes, and basil. Like, I've had caprese salad, you know, and I know that that's going to work for me because that was the only option that was available to me in Italy that I could eat. And it worked, but I did it before a couple of runs when I was there. It worked for me. Do I recommend eating caprese salad before you race? No, I do not. I absolutely don't. Pizza, I like pizza before I race, but I think one of my strategies is that before I race, I actually have an early dinner. And then I have a snack roughly before I go to bed, because I want to make sure that I've digested all of that and that I've hydrated enough after having a lot of carbohydrates before I sleep. Because having a lot of carbohydrates and trying to sleep when you're already nervous and anxious just causes you to kind of toss and turn, and it can be really uncomfortable. How about you? What's your favorite pre-race?
I typically go with either a BLT or again, it's something I know I can find most places where I can make with avocado. Or I do a really light pasta dish with like chicken or salmon. some sort of protein.
Yeah.
Again, eating early. I'm the kind of person who eats dessert every night. So
That's
just getting that yogurt and fruit before I go to bed and some tea and just trying to keep my ritual as normal as possible.
Yeah.
I try not to eat much differently than I eat most days.
Right.
Because why?
Why? I have two things I definitely don't eat before I race. Number one, salad. Yeah. No. Don't eat salad. Don't be like, oh, I'm doing something very healthy tomorrow. I'm gonna get a jump on my health and go have that huge spinach salad the day before. It's got a lot of fiber. If you guys know about how fiber works, things aren't going to go well around mile 18.
What I always tell athletes is get that fiber in the 2 days before so that you're nice and regular before the race.
Yeah, you don't want to all of a sudden
but
come
not
on.
mid-race.
You don't want to come online, mid-race. Not fun. And then, again, in the fiber realm of things are a lot of legumes, like a bean burrito. I know, right? It sounds delicious, or I would say anything that's really greasy, like really, really greasy, or has a lot of cheese, things like that, like a lot of dairy or very high saturated fat kind of stuff, with the exceptions of coconut oil and those kind of things are good saturated fats. Those are great, especially if those are in your diet regularly, but don't go to that greasy Mexican place the day before, unless you know that greasy Mexican place works for you. Again, you got to go back to what works for you and what are your knowns. At the end of the day, you can probably walk into pretty much any Kroger's or whatever and be able to get something off the shelf, either pre-made. That's kind of like a little game I play with myself, is having been in other situations. What can I walk into the store and eat and be fueled? What do I know? And that's how I know myself as an athlete, and I know what I'm capable of. So
and then breakfast, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Make sure you're giving yourself enough time before the race. Make sure you're not eating bigger than you normally do before a long run.
For sure.
And if it's a super early start, practice that a couple of times, eating at 4 a.m. versus 7 a.m. Because that goes downhill quickly. Yeah,
and that's kind of why we both eat an earlier dinner, is that hopefully when we wake up, we're actually hungry. Because if you're not used to waking up at 4 a.m., you're probably not going to be hungry at 4 a.m. And when you're not hungry to eat, you may not eat as much. So I believe that was someone entering the Zoom. Mr. Matt, how are you? Uh-oh, you may still be on mute. We can't hear you.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Good. I was just figuring out, we got Facebook watch parties, Instagram.
We got it all, man. We're
on all the feeds. Love it.
All the feeds. We are here. So you got some questions to shoot our way. You got a little race coming up. The Boston Marathon's coming your way.
Just a little thing, a little local event.
Small one, not so local.
Yeah, a tiny one. Yeah, training's going well so far. Thanks.
Awesome.
Lexi, that was a fun one today, doing progression hill run.
Oh yeah.
Give him some hills. That's awesome.
Some hard hills.
Excellent. What kind of questions you got, man?
I was just watching in over lunch. You guys, okay. I love your Okay.
Very cool.
We had some questions on the Facebook feed for y'all.
Oh,
ooh.
Let's see if we can find it. I can't see.
Oh, maybe it's on the. Let me see if it's on the where we asked the question.
Oh,
let me go over there. You're good.
We got comments. We'll hop in via the only other device in the room not casting something.
It's because my phone's not tech enough. Oh, yes, there are questions.
Questions. Let's see them.
So someone has a 50-mile coming up in 10 weeks after 50K this year. What tips do you have between switching your mindset so you don't go into the taper crazies?
Yeah, so 50-miler, 10 weeks after a 50K. So I think I'll actually let you hop in there. You've got the psychology piece a little bit better than I do with your background.
Well, and I think that's actually going to be a great setup.
Yeah, agreed.
So what you're going to first look at is, do you want to do your absolute best in both of these races? It's A-okay if you do.
Yep.
But if it's 50-miler is going to be your big main event, then you're not going to really taper much for that 50K, or vice versa. If the 50K is the big main event and then the 50-miler is hey, I want to do something with my training, then you're going to taper for that 50K, give yourself some recovery time afterward, and then just kind of cruise into that 50-miler. Honestly, your training for the two of them isn't going to be hugely different, hopefully. I I really don't think that your training for a 50 miler has to be even a whole lot more than training for a hard marathon. You're going to be gaining about some miles. You're going to be spending more time out there because you're going to be running slower and on more trails, but you're going to be doing less like intense workouts.
Yeah.
So I think that like training for that 50K, you're going to be awesome going into the 50 miler. If both are going to be your A event, which is the life I lead to, so I hear you, girl. You are going to have a lot of time cutting down on miles, and you're going to need to figure out your rhythm. It's not going to behoove you to take like a full 2 weeks off after your 50K, but ease in, make sure that you're really recovering. You are giving yourself a couple days off. You're figuring out some cross training that might work for you. Maybe going for a hike instead of your long run for a weekend or two, and just listening to your body.
Yeah.
How about you? What thoughts do you have?
So the way I would look at this, especially if it's, if it's your first 50K or your first 50 miler, use that 50K as your chance to kind of, that's your test,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one, if you finish, right? And when you finish, that's a PR, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right there. You've had that experience and you're going to learn a whole lot from that. And I think that's the mindset I would take going into that first 50K is it's just a learning experience. You're going to learn how does it feel towards the end of that race? Because you and I have both said many, many times, a 50K is not just a slightly longer marathon.
Nope, it's 20% longer.
Yeah.
I think that's how we should phrase it, because people are like, it's just over a marathon. You're like, how many times have you finished a marathon and been like, yeah, just casually throw in another 5?
Yeah.
Never.
Not many.
Never once have I.
Effort-wise, it's a little different. But
well, sure, but.
So I think, one, use that 50K to learn and say, okay, here's the things I want to work on these next 10 weeks. And use that to kind of guide your training. And this is where I can't say enough about the dialogue between coach and athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Like actually break down when you go to do those notes and your post-race kind of briefing, like sit down and like write about here's what I ate before, here's what I did during, I had this, I hydrated like this. Did that play out the way you wanted to? Excluding environmental factors, it being super hot or, super crazy weather. If it was good weather, what would you change? What would you adjust? Was the clothing right? Were the shoes right? Like all of those things that in the next 10 weeks, you can kind of integrate into your training. And I think if you're saying, hey, both of these are A races, you do have the time.
You have 6 weeks of training in between.
At
If you think
least.
about like 2 weeks of recovery.
And 2 weeks taper.
Yeah. And taper, really more like 10 days, but we'll say 2 weeks for the sake of.
Yeah. So I think the reality is you have pretty much 2 months of training in between those events that if you're like, I started to really peter out towards the end, even though I paced this pretty well, I just started to get kind of tired. We can add some miles, adjust training and things like that in that time frame. But that's where the dialogue and kind of knowing what you need is where that back and forth and where I think the value of coaching really starts to come in, not just from having a great plan and having a good eye forward, but being able to have the back and forth connection is huge.
I think another thing that should always be mentioned with someone running their first 50K or their first trail race is you're going to feel a lot different than you would after a marathon.
Yeah.
A marathon is a lot of pounding, a lot of faster running, and just hard on your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to feel a lot better after the 50K. That doesn't mean that you should sacrifice that
Yeah,
recovery.
don't go do that tempo run.
Because you're still fatigued.
Yeah.
You still put your body through a lot. You just didn't have that impact the same way. So I think that's another thing to always mention to first time
I think that's good.
ultra runners.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions in the chats there? I think when it comes to doing something you haven't done before, there's always going to be the thought that I could have gone faster. And I think everybody would much rather finish a race with a little more left in the tank and knowing that they can come back that next time and do better instead of like blowing up in this huge fashion. I know we talked about that blow-ups are good in workouts and things like that. But I think the reality is that you want to save those blow-ups for in your training versus coming in and, doing that in a race. Some of that is inevitable. Sometimes we just make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, those things do happen. What else do we have in there?
That was it.
That was it.
I think maybe
Gasp. Maybe not.
not. Let me check some more places.
Yeah,
I always
Yeah,
ask
guys, a question in the meantime.
Oh, all good. Did we have any? I don't know if we have anything on the gram. Anything come into the inbox?
Nothing on the
there?
grams.
Well, either way, Mr. Matt, how? We'll do a little fun coaching session here. We'll make this a little exciting for those that are watching.
Woohoo!
Yeah, let's do it.
So what would you say your if you had something maybe along an anxiety or something that is kind of hanging in the back of your head that I wonder how I'm going to feel at mile 18 or things like that, from where you are right now between now and Boston, what are the things that are kind of on your mind about what you're looking to feel like in your training, or maybe that anxiety that might be creeping in as training gets closer?
So funny. Usually it's a race-related thing. Typically, this year it's not. This year it's something outside my control. It's the coronavirus canceling Tokyo, and it's like, oh, great. Is Boston going to get canceled too if it spreads to the U.S.? I don't know. But other than that, like, I'm just focusing on training. My body's feeling good. I had some fun last week at the Mardi Gras half marathon.
Yeah, you did amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. And actually, this is going to lead into a question for you, Lexi. So Mount Carbon just crushed me.
It's a tough one.
And the guy in first place, he was just like a mountain goat. Like, he ran like a 6:22 mile, and like the hills, he just crushed it. So I guess one, I thought you had a hill training session coming up. So do you want to plug that? And two, what tips do you have for kind of training yourself up so when you conquer a hill like that, approach a hill like that, you know what to do? Because like, I'm looking at my Garmin data, and like I can tell, like, yeah, pace went lower on a big hill like that naturally, but I noticed like my cadence went down, my stride length went down, ground contact time went up. I'm just like, how should I run hills, and what should I do to practice on it?
So what happens a lot is people kind of slow down their cadence because they suddenly start trying to get these like crazy big steps. Why we do that on hills, I don't know, like what our psychology is there, because it's the opposite of what we should be doing. The first thing I want people to notice when they're running up a hill is what their posture is doing. So I might awkwardly stand up. What we tend to do is kind of, am I facing the right way? It's kind of hunch, which is not what we want, because we're kind of closing off our lungs and we're taking away all the power from our glutes and our quads. So stand up a little bit straighter and then lean at the hips. What I tell people to do is look forward a few feet rather than at their feet, so that they're going to kind of keep their shoulders back.
Natural.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing with the arms. If you're racing a road race, you're going to keep running. So make sure you're landing more kind of that forefoot. Hopefully you're not heel striking anyway, but some of us just heel strike. It's your natural rhythm. So land more forefoot. Not on your toes, because that's going to just be using your calves, which is not going to be ideal. Yeah. And that's when we're probably going to be getting that like crazy weird cadence and lose all of our energy like 5 feet into the hill. So land with midfoot, really work on engaging those glutes. So that's where it's going to be during your strength training outside of the race, where you're going to need to be working on that strength, work on your hamstring strength. What I like to tell athletes too, it sounds really silly, but pretend you're pulling yourself up with a rope. Yeah. Because that's going to keep your arms moving at a steady pace. What I like to do with training on hills is set my watch to heart rate. I do this on races too, especially trail races or ultras, is I just would rather pay attention to make sure I'm not getting into a crazy zone and pushing myself too hard up that hill. Otherwise, you're going to lose it on the next one. So keeping that nice short cadence, landing forefoot, making sure your posture's staying correct, you're not hunching. And then working on that speed up the hills, again, on the training days.
I think that's right. I one or two thoughts.
Go ahead.
Sweet. So I think one of the things that I do is that I try to consciously think that when I'm running and I'm doing a hill workout, I'm kind of playing with that foot position and saying, oh, if I'm up here, I feel this more in my calves. And I'm not just focused on like hard, fast, like, okay, what's my body position? And if I'm landing more of that midfoot, do I feel like I'm more powerful? How do I feel for one? But the other thing is that when I'm looking at a hill, I'm not just going to start managing myself when I'm on the hill. I'm actually looking and saying, okay, that hill is coming up. I want to start to take a couple breaths. I might actually slow my pace a little bit or adjust my cadence. And I like to think of maybe trying to carry momentum into that hill, like saying, okay, if I'm going to accelerate, I might take a couple deep breaths, slow my pace for a second, feel very recovered, and then start to kind of wind up. Because when we kind of go and it's a steep hill and all of a sudden you start to kind of just do this snap of like, now I'm going up the hill. It's kind of like, would you rather downshift in the middle of a hill and lose that momentum and kind of let your car fall back? Or would you rather have been in the lower gear and carried those RPMs into it? I know that's a total car analogy. If you've ever driven a stick, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. But you almost need to downshift sooner and be able to kind of carry that momentum into the hill so that you can kind of come over the top. And I think one of the great things is that do some hills where you're ending right at the top of a hill, and for 5 seconds try to, keep your cadence or your speed and breathe at the top of a hill as you're kind of coming down it. Because you need to learn how to relax everything. Because if you're carrying that tension, that like tight chest, that high breathing from coming up a hill, and you don't take a chance to like relax at the top of a hill, then when you're coming down and you have to do all these like not isometric but eccentric contractions of absorbing going downhill, it can be a lot, and you might cramp up on the downside of the hill up high in your diaphragm. Like you mentioned, don't be hunched over because you're compressing your diaphragm.
For those who do, like, this is a mentality I have from like growing up downhill skiing and mountain biking, is lean where you want to go.
Yeah.
So that's something that helps me on hills. And then at the top, same thing. I always shake out my shoulders and arms like that.
Yep.
I make a loud noise. I scare runners around me, but it's a thing that helps me switch in my head.
Yep.
I'm no longer in uphill mode. I'm getting ready to like cruise on the downhill.
Yeah. That's like I said, changing gears.
Yeah.
Like being able to do that in a workout as well. Like a workout that I like to give, if any of my athletes are on here, I give that like 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 workout, because you're forced to change gears. Your minute pace is 5K, 2 minutes is 10K, 3 minutes is half marathon or marathon. And being able to like switch those gears and get into those different paces. It's why we don't just always go and do marathon pace. It's why we do things that are faster than marathon pace. I think we had a question from Mr. Chance here. Downhill marathons. My first marathon will be the Colorado Marathon, mostly downhill. What kind of downhill training should I be doing and where?
I think that a couple things we'll talk about here.
Yeah.
Colorado Marathon is awesome because it's not a crazy steep downhill marathon.
Yeah, it's not Revel.
Yeah. So I do want to touch on Revel in case anyone watches this and like, because those guys are steep, and I think we've both discussed that they are quad destroyers.
Yeah.
Before we knew each other, we ran the same one in Salt Lake on the same year, which I think is funny.
I ran the half. You ran the full though.
It was my first Boston qualifier. So like, there's a good thing that's one of the benefits of the downhill marathons is they're really great for your mental strength. Because then you're like, oh shoot, yeah, I can do that. However, all the mistakes that I learned that time, and now that I talk to athletes about, is practice running downhill.
Yeah.
Find a friend, a spouse, an Uber who will drop you off on top of a hill, and you can run back down to your car or your house, and just practice that speed, because you're not going to suddenly develop it in the race.
Well, especially living in altitude, right? Like one of the hardest things is that even going to a sea level race is getting in some turnover and hitting that goal pace. If anybody wants, I will post it in our Lifelong Endurance Athletes and Coaches page. One of my favorite runs that's actually right here in the local area. It's actually a little bit up towards Boulder, so it's close enough if you're looking for a good one. It's got about 9 miles of straight downhill, and actually you start in Gold Hill, so that's a little bit north and west of Boulder. And then you end up running down and you get onto, I want to say it's Neva Road or Niwot. And then it's got a couple of rollers, but it's net downhill route. And then you end towards like Coot Lake. And if you want, you can finish on what they call the Honda Loop. And it's about a little 4-mile loop right there, but it gives you the opportunity to have a run that's by majority downhill. I don't like I don't like to encourage my athletes to run like from Evergreen down the canyon. It is just too narrow. It's too tight. I'm really excited though, because they're doing a lot of work right here in Golden. They're actually building and going to finish connecting the path that does come down Clear Creek from Evergreen. So there will be an entire bike path here in the next year. And so that's going to be a huge advantage for those of us right here in Golden to get a net downhill run that's nearly the same profile as the Canyon Over, which is where the race is run. So, yeah.
Some things with Colorado Marathon is there are some rolling hills on the second half of the race around mile 16, 17.
Yeah.
And those I think really kind of throw off people because you've just been like cruising, feeling strong, feeling amazing. Then suddenly it's open, it's hot.
Yep.
There's hills. It's a little bit of a mental check.
Yep.
So just preparing for that. So maybe getting some runs where you're kind of getting some of those hills.
Use it as an opportunity to fuel.
Yeah.
When you know, like, oh, mile 15, I got to eat because I know I'm going to come up this and I want to feel like I've got the energy. But again, get used to doing like a workout you could put in, or maybe talk with your coach or, or add this to your training plan. One of the things I like to do is what I call a flat to hill workout, where you might run your marathon pace and know that halfway through that, it's going to come up and all you're trying to do in that hill section is maintain your marathon pace. Just kind of a good way, again, downshift before, figure out where you want to accelerate beforehand so you can carry that momentum into the hill.
And then just like running down,
No, go ahead.
Just like running down hills, we need to make sure that we're not, or running up hills, we need to make sure we're not landing on those heels.
Yeah.
And braking, which is another common thing I see people do in those downhill races is like all the energy they're expanding by just like break every step.
So cadence drills, form work, part of the I got a great question, and I think I answered this last week, but I'll bring it up again because it's worth saying. Why would I give an athlete hill work when they're doing a downhill marathon? Plain and simple. It is really hard to run uphill wrong. It's going to help you get more comfortable with running on your midfoot and forefoot, because if there's one thing that you can do that across all of your training is that if you can become a more efficient runner, so that when you're hitting the ground and you're just coming right off, right? Like you talked, Matt, was the ground contact time. When you're going downhill, if you can minimize your ground contact time, you're also minimizing the forces that you're taking up into your legs. And it's going to prevent you from having the loss of an eccentric contraction, meaning that when your muscles have to eccentrically contract, there's this constriction that happens. And just that like catching of like, when you jump down from a box or jump down from 2 steps up above, you're like, oh, that made my legs hurt a little bit. Well, do that a couple thousand times and that's a downhill race. So the next thing to kind of think about there is minimize the amount of time that you're touching the ground, but also what are the kind of things that you can add into your training? And what I would say is start with something really small and get used to, like what I just said, is doing some jumps down. They don't have to be loaded jumps down, but they can be just body weight, and slowly moving that up to the point where you're getting really good at landing, and maybe landing mid-foot to forefoot and getting used to just landing and getting used to kind of taking up and conditioning your legs a little bit. You can also look at something that's called a depth jump, where you're landing and then you're having a reaction force of jumping then onto another box. Maybe even doing it as something as simple as 45-pound plates, is standing on one, jumping, and getting to the next one, and they're spaced, maybe 2 plates apart. Things like that are going to allow you to get more comfortable with taking up a little bit of that, because it's inevitable that running downhill, you're going to take up some eccentric contraction force, but it's conditioning your body, whether that's doing a long run, adding that into just your regular training, kind of making sure that you're not seeking out the flat, easy stuff, like actually getting more used to handling that terrain, and then throwing some time in the gym to do some of that eccentric work. It's, just strengthen those quads a lot. That helps significantly.
I would say also this goes for someone running a flat marathon as well. You might not feel as hungry and thirsty right away because it's going to be slightly easier than most of your training runs, but making sure that you're staying up with your nutrition, hydration.
Yeah.
Colorado Marathon's amazing because it starts way up in the canyon. It's cool. You're running downhill, but nice graded downhill, so you're not feeling pushed.
Yep.
So it's easy to kind of fall into that trap.
Have a plan, right? Set a nutrition plan, and this is one of those few times where I tell an athlete, like, if eat every 40 minutes, 35 minutes, whatever it is, and stick to that, even if you don't feel hungry. This is one of those few times when it's just better to make sure that you have the calories in, and you can trust yourself later that you're going to be fueled, versus getting through 12 miles and be like, I haven't eaten yet. Now I'm starting to feel it. and now I got to respond to that hill, and I'm under fueled. So I think we have time for maybe one quick question. Our Instagram live feed just ended because we hit an hour. We're at an hour right now on Facebook Live. So if there are any other questions, we will answer them next week, it looks like. Otherwise, thank you guys so much. Take a look at our event calendar, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you, guys.